Welcome to Yerevan, the capital city of Armenia. The 17th Summit for Francophonie just closed. Our guest today is the French President of the Republic, Mr. Macron. Mr. President, thank you for being with us.
Hello.
With me, Christophe Boisbouvier from RFI and Marc Perelman from France-24. Mr. President, the Rwanda Foreign Minister, Louise Mushikiwabo, got just assigned as Secretary General for Francophonie. Michael Jean, the former one, left quite tumultuously and stated that the organization is now tampering with the principles and is already a moribund organization. End of quote. She's referring to the principles of democracy and human rights because Rwanda is not considered as a model in this context. What is your reaction?
I'd like to thank Armenia, its Prime Minister, and the whole of the government, the President also, who were there yesterday. I'd like to thank them for their welcome and the organization of the summit. It is the first time that Armenia hosts such a large summit with a host of heads of states and of government. I wanted to start this interview by thanking our Armenian friends. I had the occasion to say it yesterday when Francophonie is a club, a closed one, where some give lessons to others. It makes no results. I'd rather have a Francophonie with new demands, and this is what I explained yesterday, where there's going to be a movement of an ensemble. I said it a year ago in Ouagadougou. I think that the current heart of Francophonie is Africa. And should there be a candidacy of Africa that would be in a consensus, France would support it. It so happens that Rwanda, who's chairing this year the African Union, has presented the candidacy of its Minister of Foreign Affairs. She succeeded in getting this consensus that was restated behind closed doors this morning of all the African states of the African Union. So we're respected by our commitment, and against this background, it's much more a Francophonie of conquest that we have seen during this summit and that they will go on seeing. When you have a country like Rwanda that turned its back to the French language, who came back, who took its responsibility with a French-speaking minister, where half of the population speaks French there. It is obviously a light shed on our language, on its values and what it will enable to do. Moreover, born by a woman who was bearing high the colors of the gender equality in her own country with success. And they have lessons to teach to other ones. Each and everyone has to teach to someone else or to learn from someone else. Nobody should be pointed at. When I see during this summit the president of Ghana expressing himself in French and telling at the pulpit that he will make compulsory the French language in the schools, it's Francophonie. All this is moving forward. We have to get out from all bitterness. I mean, there was a real consensus in the French-speaking family. And I am glad with this appointment because it is the face of Francophonie of today.
Now, simply put, Mr. President, Rwanda is not exactly a model for democracy and human rights. There are political prisoners, and people have disappeared for political reasons. Now, by placing a major Rwanda figure at OIF, are we not putting it in full contradiction with the charter of OIF, which promotes those values of democracy, freedom, and human rights?
I bet that it's going to be the opposite. I think, first of all, that the French-speaking family should keep a homogeneity. We have it today. I'm not part of those who think that we have to extend endlessly or to make bad compromise about the human rights issues. I'm convinced that by a demand of everybody, by a pressure of the peers that we have done on very concrete cases, we can get things done. The face of Rwanda of today is the face of a transformation, of a change. I alluded to it. On issues like the gender equality, Rwanda moved forward and is much more forward than others. It is right now making a real political transition. I do hope so. I think that this appointment is compelling. And the process that has always been mine, it is the one to work with all of the states, try to promote those values, not by giving lessons from the outside. This is very easy. I can do it from Paris. But by showing, by convincing, giving responsibilities and trusting is compelling and compels to change oneself. You know, Francophonie has ahead of it several projects. First, the project of youth and its language. And this is why I wanted it to be an African country that could chair, an African candidacy that would emerge, because this African youth, we have for it to bear the fight of Francophonie. It's the youngest continent. It is a continent where the French language is very represented, where we have and will have more and more speakers. And this struggle for the French language, it's a combat, a struggle for the French education, for girls and boys. It's a fight against obscurantism, because when you teach in French, you learn the values going alongside, the values of a free spirit, and you fight against obscurantism. And to do it from Africa, on lands that were wounded by history, of course, it has much more weight, and it's going to be even better born. And the fight for Francophonie is a fight for multilingualism. French is not always the first language, but it's the first foreign language or the first language taught then in schools. And I think that the model of the French language is not to be a dominant language. It's to be a language of reference, of transition, so to speak. And from that point of view, this is why I launched those initiatives of large dictionaries of Francophonie and a dictionary between French and various African language, and to have a general secretary from a country where multilingualism has been installed with, in the past, elements of tension. This will be an element of reconciliation, and Francophonie will have common goods to defend. Authors, the integrity of information, a struggle which is dear to you and which is dear to me too, which is essential in Francophonie, the environment, the gender equality and human rights.
Now, that's the point. You were talking about historical wounds and this relation between France and Rwanda, and this was so painful and difficult a relation. How about gestures, possible gestures, such as the nomination of a French ambassador in Rwanda? We haven't had one for quite a number of years. A visit to Kigali. We're going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the genocide in April, very specifically.
Very concretely, I believe in action better than in gestures. So what is action? First, it is a work on the issues of future economy, new technology. This is why I invited President Kagame to Paris during the Vivatech Summit, and we go on sharing and working together, because Rwanda is an example in terms of new technology and digital development. Second point, working in common with the African Union and the chair and the Rwanda chair. We do this since the beginning of this term. We're going to go on with the real work on all the situation of tension and conflict. This is the method I'm using since the beginning of my term. No intrusion, but a work with peers, with the African Union, with the reference named by the African Union according to the regional situation, and to make a pressure there. And it was shown that it was an efficient method, and we're moving forward. Thirdly, this gesture of confidence, trust, support within the African Union, a single candidacy. Rwanda takes its own place, and it's compelling for its opening. And fourth element, very concrete, in which I believe, is the initiative for the peacekeeping operations. This is something we prepared with President Kagame that I supported a few days ago in New York at the United Nations, meaning that the United Nations should change its vision of peacekeeping in Africa and working much more with African operation together with the African Union. This is what we want to develop in the Sahel and the Lake Chad and other regions where it is mandatory. So this is an agenda we wanted to implement, but there is no symbolic agenda. I think, rather, that it's a method that is being implemented that will enable, as for now, results, outcomes which are good for Africa.
In Turkey, the journalist, the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi disappeared in October last within the Saudi Arabian consulate in Istanbul. According to Turkish administration, he would have allegedly been killed under the order of the Saudi government. We still haven't heard you in this case. On the one hand, the Venezuelan ambassador Arabia was summoned in Paris, and right now there are no reactions insofar as this case is concerned.
The French Foreign Affairs Ministry expressed itself, which is the right thing to do. It's up to the minister to do so, because I didn't take the floor. And it's not, I don't usually take the floor in a solemn way on a situation like this one. You can make summons, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs did it and expressed itself clearly. The facts that you're alluding to are serious, very serious. And today, I expect for the truth and clarity to be established. But France earnestly wishes everything to be in place so we get the truth on this issue. And the first elements are, for me, very worrying and very serious.
Have you been talking about it with the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia?
I had no discussion yet with the Turkish president, nor with the Crown Prince, nor with the King of Saudi. I will have one in the coming days.
I would also wanted to ask you regarding Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia is a major client when it comes to weapons, most especially.
I'll stop you right here. First, I never installed diplomacy based on trade criteria. For me, there's one very simple thing in the grammar of the French diplomacy. It is that the politic is prevailing over economy. Never interests of such and such enterprise had precedence on the voice of France. And this is the second thing why I stopped you. It is wrong to say that Saudi Arabia is a major client of France in any area. It's not the case.
There is a polemic regarding the war in Yemen. The United Nations is now saying that the coalition under the Saudi responsibility is now committing very serious crimes, and Western countries are still selling weapons. Those countries, including France, are they not selling themselves short in this respect?
No, because France has a very rigorous policy in this matter, with an interministerial commission of control of armaments chaired by the Prime Minister, the siège, as we call it technically in French, which is very scrupulous from that point of view. I myself met with NGOs and shared with them, and we're not part of the providers on those materials, providers of Saudi Arabia in this conflict. Moreover, this is a discussion, which is a political one, on the conflict that we will have. Now, we have to be crystal clear. We have with Saudi Arabia and with the United Emirates a partnership of trust in the area, which is important, which is not economic, which is strategic. And even more so with the Emirates, where we have, as you know, a military presence there. It's not economic interest, it's the French state as a sovereign state, because we are sharing interests, shared interests in the region, because the stability of the region is of importance to us, because the fight against terrorism is being done with those states.
I'm sorry, but the Khashoggi case, could that put this policy back on trial?
I will not derive any conclusions from an issue where I don't have any elements. And given the elements that will be established, checked by our services, then I will have a position. I will not today derive hasty conclusions from a situation that is serious, but I don't know the ins and outs. What I want to say here is when the integrity, territorial integrity, when the security of states which are our partners is threatened, it is normal for France to be on the side. This is the case of the Emirates, this is the case of Saudi Arabia. It is to the measure of this appreciation that we will act. And there's no commercial interest there. Second point, when we consider those situations, we demand for humanitarian law to be respected and to have all the elements to be able to assess it. This is what I said to the NGOs on the situation that are denounced in the Yemen of non-respect of human rights. We asked for clarifications on all the points that have been raised. It's a discussion that we had with the Secretary General of the United Nations. This is the framework where the things are set. There are partnerships. Those are states with whom we fight against terrorism. There are demands of the international law that we respect, and we intend our partners to respect them. And this is in this framework that France is acting, no more, no less, not by following commercial interests, progress, and certainly not by hiding anything, because this policy is assumed.
2 weeks ago, your administration leveled a very serious accusation against the Iranian state and accused Iran to have prepared an attack in Villepinte in France against Iranian opponents. Fortunately, this attack was fended off. You still haven't been vocal on this very sensitive issue. Does that mean that you're perhaps ill at ease to say bad things about a country that is already under scrutiny of the U.S.?
Not at all. I shared directly with President Rouhani twice on this issue. There has been a planning of an attack, indeed, perpetrated by some services. Today, I asked for the relevant information from the Iranian president. As you know, Iran is sometimes divided among several tensions, trends. I don't know if the orders came from the top or if it was delivered by such and such service division.
Is that what you were told?
No, not yet. I have no more information. What is for certain is that the excellent European cooperation enabled to foil this planned attack. It didn't take place. Those who planned this attack are under legal investigation, and we took the measures in reaction beyond the talks I had with President Rouhani.
Is not a part of Donald Trump's rationale when he says that it's very difficult to deal with that country and actually wanted a withdrawal from that nuclear treaty? Is he not right to be tough on Iran?
Well, it is difficult. We never said otherwise. Second point, go further and enclose Iran in a more demanding policy. This is what you hear me say from the beginning of my term. More than a year ago, in front of the ambassadors and at the General Assembly of the United Nations, I said that the strategy with Iran was on 4 points: maintaining the nuclear agreement, possibility frame the nuclear activity beyond 2025, frame the ballistic activity, and the possibility to contain the influence of Iran in the region. I've never been naive with Iran. The disagreement is a disagreement of method or path with the United States. Against such a background, I think that we do not protect ourselves or we don't avoid new deviations by getting out from the JCPOA. Why? Because the day Iran will get out of the nuclear agreement, we will have no vision upon their activity.
Is that a fear?
We do everything for them not to get out of it, but the elements revealed by Israel were elements pre-existing this agreement, showing how far Iran was on the road of the nuclear armament. So it is not efficient to get out from the nuclear agreement, and there is a risk of flaring up of the region if we go to such an extent. And three, I think it's much more efficient to toughen the stance on all the other issues. It goes in the direction of a lack of naivety with Iran, which has been planned and would have foiled, but France never was naive.
Mr. President, this is not the end of the interview. Because we're now abroad, we did not question you on the current government reshuffle. In just a few words, is it going to be taking place this coming weekend or by Monday?
This is what we call preterition. What you just said. I will not give in to that. I do things in the right order. I'll just tell you. It has to be done quietly. And our citizens, I hope, are not giving in to all the pressures. I do things quietly. I do it in the respect of the individuals. And I try to do things in a professional way. In any organization of human life, either a corporation, an association, a domestic job, whatever, when you want to act with people, you take time to know them, that you think the same thing, to check the ins and outs. It takes time. It's legitimate. But when it comes to government, you would like things to be done overnight because you get used to the fact that people are interchangeable, that it's, they are like aleheads displays. No. It's important. Those are commitments, and we have to do things quietly, with method, at the right pace. No disruption. Government is at work, no position is vacant, and things are moving forward and enabling me to be present here at the summit of Francophonie with you at Yerevan, where we defended our language, our values, and our contemporaneous struggles. And we are bearing something which is very important for our citizens here, because when we defend French around the world, we defend the interest of all our citizens. The interest is to have this space, cultural space of creation, of sharing everywhere in the world as strong as possible. And because we defend also a community of values, a same understanding of the world. So it was very important to be here.
Mr. President, thank you for having accepted this invitation from France 24 and from RFI.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for being with us.
Merci beaucoup.